Hey folks, my name is John Lay and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about a book called Kim Ji-young Born 1982. Now, Kim Ji-young Born 1982 was originally published in 2016 and is written by South Korean author Nam-joo. This book has been sold in many different countries and has been translated into more than a dozen languages, and it sold more than 1 million copies worldwide. Now, as for this book itself, I have to admit that I had not heard of it until 2018 when it was announced that a movie was going to be made based on this book. The movie stars Chung Yumi as the titular character and was released back in 2019. After having read the book and watched the movie, I realized that there was some differences between the two, but we'll get into that later. First, let's talk about the similarities. Both the book and the movie are about a 33-year-old South Korean millennial woman who has come to symbolize the modern South Korean woman. Suffering from postpartum and childcare depression that has been exacerbated by a mountain of microaggressions that she has had to endure her whole life, she appears to have developed a sort of dissociative disorder. She takes on the personalities of the women that she's known throughout her entire life. From time to time, she starts to act and speak like her mother, her grandmother, and some of her friends, and she is unaware of her behavior the whole time. Although the book is a fictional autobiography of Kim Ji-young, the book's prose is somewhat minimalist. There is something a bit Hemingway-esque about the brevity of the sentences. There isn't all that much flair to this book. In fact, while you read this book, there are statistical facts that are peppered around the book. And so occasionally, it doesn't feel like you're reading a novel, but it kind of feels like you're reading a magazine article or an academic journal. Now, this book is pretty short. It has less than 200 pages, but don't let the brevity fool you. This book is actually quite powerful. Now, I don't mean to say that this book is some powerful punch that will knock the wind out of you. It's not that kind of book. There's no mystery to solve or a criminal mastermind's plan to solve either. This book is about the banalities of the patriarchy. So, just as women face things in reality, it's not a series of jabs or counterpunches, but rather 1 million paper cuts, each cut designed to slice away a piece of your soul. And that's what happens at the end of the story to Kim Ji-young. By the end of the story, she is a shell of what she used to be. Now, even though this book is less than 200 pages long, it contains a lot of themes and elements that have to do with what women face every day in their lives. For example, one of the earliest themes that the book deals with is Korean society's traditional preference for boys over girls, and how women had a tendency to erase pregnancies when they discovered that they were pregnant with girls. It also deals with how daughters and sons are treated so differently from the moment that they are born that by the time that the children grow up, even the girls have internalized misogyny. The book also deals with how menstruation is treated as something to be ashamed of. It talks about how women are expected to sacrifice their youth, their future, and their lives in order to advance the lives of their brothers, of their sons, for little to no thanks. It's about how women are slut-shamed when they attract the wrong kind of attention. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace. It's about spy cam porn, or molka as it is called in Korean. It's about the casual, everyday sexism and misogyny practiced by men all over the world. It's about the glass ceiling that seems to be impenetrable by women. The whole book is just full of one stinging paper cut on top of another. But here's the thing. There's nothing extraordinary about Kim Ji-young's story. Everything about her story is just so painfully mundane and ordinary. And that is what makes this story so crushing. Then there's the fact that this story is told in a chronological order. It's strictly linear. It starts from her childhood, adolescence, adulthood, motherhood. This linear construction of the story gives the sense that the end of the story is inevitable, that there is no way to change the trajectory of the story in any way, shape, or form. Now, one of the themes that this story talks about is how she wants to escape from this fate, but there doesn't seem to be a way out. It's like as though she's on this path and someone designed this path for her with no doors in or out. She's completely stuck. And so, by the end of the story, The only way for her to escape this reality is for her to lose her mind. And I think that's the biggest difference between the book and the movie. The book is pretty bleak. There's no way out. There's no catharsis, and there's certainly no light at the end of the tunnel. But the movie is different. At the end of the movie, there seems to be hope. For example, let's talk about the husband a bit. In the book, the husband, well, he's not exactly a monster, but he's certainly a part of the problem. But in the movie, the husband is kind and loving and understanding and compassionate. He's definitely part of the solution. In fact, all of Chiyoung's family members and her friends, even her mother-in-law, are quite supportive, and they try their best to help her out. So when the movie ends, it feels like there's hope for mental recovery and a better future. Now, one thing that I think we need to discuss about this book was when it was published. As I said earlier, it was published in 2016. And 2016 was a rather eventful year in Korea. Now, in the book, when Jiyoung is still a kid, her mother tells her that by the time she's an adult, she will likely see a female president. And her mother turns out to have been right. That's because in 2013, South Koreans elected our first and thus far only female president. Unfortunately, that female president turned out to be Park Geun-hye. Now, Park Geun-hye is the daughter of South Korea's former dictator, Park Chung-hee. When Park Geun-hye became president, while certainly not to the extent as her father, she also pursued a rather patriarchal, authoritarian set of policies. During her presidency, gender inequality worsened, as did the gender wealth gap. Also, sex crimes rose during her presidency as well. Now, in 2016, something horrific happened in Gangnam. One night, a young woman was partying with her friends in Gangnam and she went to a public bathroom. This man had a knife and he stabbed her to death. When the police arrested him, he said that he just wanted to take revenge on this woman. And as it turned out, this man and this woman had never met before. They were complete strangers. So why did he kill this woman? It wasn't anything to do with this particular woman exactly. He said that he was ignored and humiliated by women his entire life. And he just wanted to teach this one stranger that he met a lesson. This horrific crime sent shockwaves around the country. And that's because this crime was not about this one particular woman. It was a crime that affected all women. It could have been anyone who was killed that night. And so, many women, for weeks, protested in Gangnam. And they shared their stories. They shared their stories about how they faced everyday misogyny, about how they felt unsafe, about how they felt like second-class citizens. This event was one of the catalysts that helped to spur South Korea's Me Too movement. Now, this was the environment in which this book came into existence. And so naturally, this book became a lightning rod of sorts, a type of Rorschach's test. Women and feminists rallied around this book because this book was their story. It was their testimony. On the other hand, many men, far too many men in my opinion, came out swinging against this book. At first, it started out as cries of not all men. But later on, it became about how this book ignored the perceived discriminations that men faced in Korean society. Far too many men's reactions to this book were just simply toxic. For example, there is a K-pop group called Red Velvet, and one of its singers goes by the stage name Irene. Now, while Irene was in a fan meeting, she mentioned that she had finished reading this book, and all hell broke loose after that. Because you see, in Korea, feminism is a dirty word, and some of her former male fans started to burn pictures of her. She wasn't the only one. Any female celebrity who dared to mention this book were bombarded with threats and savagely attacked on social media and ultimately silenced. Ironically, or perhaps not so ironically, when male celebrities like Yoo Ji-seo or male politicians like President Moon Jae-in promoted this book, they didn't face nearly the kind of backlash that the women faced. And when the film adaptation was announced, the same thing happened all over again. Internet trolls swarmed all over social media to leave negative reviews for the movie even before the movie even came out. So why am I talking about this? Well, as you can all tell, I'm a man. But there's something else that we need to discuss. More important than my gender, anyway. and I believe that's my politics. And I promise you, there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. Now, my politics has evolved over the years, and I'm sure that it will continue to evolve, but I was never what you would call a progressive or a liberal. My politics has always been around the center right, for the lack of a better phrase. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because both this book and this movie were predominantly enjoyed by women. Now, I think, I could be wrong here, but I think that those women should not have been the main audience for this book or this movie. And that's because, regardless of culture or nationality, this is a story that so many women already know. This is a story about women's lives. How could they not know about this story? They don't need to have read this book or watched this movie to know what this story is about. Rather, I think it should have been men who watched this movie. And when I say men, I don't mean any group of men. I mean men who particularly share my political leanings. Now, it doesn't matter that not all men are raging misogynists who believe that women only belong in the kitchen. Neither this book nor this movie are talking to those kinds of men. They're talking to groups of men who, either knowingly or unknowingly, help to perpetuate a patriarchal system that snuffs out women's voices. And that description, unfortunately, applies to far too many of us. Now, one of the themes that both this book and movie talk about is equality and freedom. Now, here's the thing about equality and freedom. It is not a zero-sum game. The freedom that I enjoy, the equality that I enjoy, do not come at the expense of your freedom or your equality. If my freedom and equality came at the expense of yours, what that means is that what you enjoyed was not freedom and equality, but most likely an unearned privilege. Now, if I saw someone enjoying an unearned privilege that came at my expense, I would want to seek justice. And I think, therefore, that it's only logical to conclude that if someone else saw me enjoying a privilege that came at his or her expense, then that person would want to seek justice too. None of us likes to think that we are the bad guy. If life is a stage, then we are all actors on that stage. But unlike a real movie, we all like to think that we're our own individual heroes. Can you imagine what existence would be like if we thought of ourselves as the villains? Life would be simply unbearable. And that is why we don't like it when someone tells us that we are being a racist or a sexist. That would make us the bad guy. That would tarnish this image that we've created for ourselves. So naturally, we don't like it. But if it turns out that our actions cause harm to others, even if it is completely unintentional, it is our responsibility to try to rectify that behavior, because that is what decent people do. Now, there is a Hebrew phrase that I'm quite fond of. It's tikkun olam. I apologize if I mispronounced it. It's a concept about repairing the world, about leaving the world in a better shape than when we first found it. Now, there is a lot of things that we need to do to repair this world, to make it a better place. And I believe that books and movies like Kim Ji-young, born 1982, will help us with that task. Okay, that about wraps it up. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell. And if you have a comment, leave it down below. My name is John Lee, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.